This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by Allison Cook and Super Inframan. Thank you so very much. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight I am joined by Mr. Christopher Ernst.
Hello, everybody.
And the infamous Red Pill Junkie. And tonight we're just going to kind of do a wandering the road thing, see where our conversations take us. I do have a couple news stories we're going to hit, maybe a listener story, and yeah, it's kind of freeform tonight. So I do want to start with something that I kind of came to this realization listening to the Brothers of the Serpent podcast when they had this guy Marty on, who's a ufologist. And he said something, and I talked about it when I was on their show, because I felt like it was right, since I came up with this listening to their show, I should probably start, by announcing, talking about this on their show. But I especially want to get your guys' thoughts on this, because, so Marty was talking about military aircraft at one point. And he said he was trying to take a picture of some military aircraft that was doing some, he said something like a skip jump maneuver. I don't know exactly what it was. I wasn't 100% paying attention to the craft he was talking about. But he started saying that his camera wouldn't focus on it. Like he couldn't get a clear picture of it. And then he stopped and said, yeah, that's because it was meant not to be detected by radar, but it's also bathed in infrared light. And immediately what came to mind is John Keel's Eighth Tower conversation, or book where he's talking about how these things move in from the infrared. And suddenly I'm like, oh my God, can we not get clear pictures of this stuff because there's infrared light all around them? Or can we, or another form of light perhaps that we don't acknowledge that's messing with our cameras?
Well, I mean, that's, yeah. There could be definitely something on the invisible spectrum of light, but it also makes me think about something that I know a little bit about, which is just color and light, as it applies to filmmaking. But within like the color spectrum, we obviously can't see all of the colors that exist there. Right. I mean, there's even, there's ways of scientifically measuring the amount of colors there. And there are these different sort of, spaces, like the color spaces that are put forth that are standards by broadcast industries, so that everybody isn't sort of using all these different colors. I don't personally know of any. I feel like most of the photography that people would have taken of these objects, they probably would have tried to use what we have available to us that I know of, which is, regular, sort of white light spectrum photography. But then we do have ultraviolet and infrared film too. Sure. But I don't think they're not very sensitive. They don't go very far into the spectrum. But again, this is like the technology that we know of. Who knows what technology exists? I'm sure there is much, much better optical technology than what the cutting edge of, cinematography is out there.
Yeah, well, but even shining an infrared light at a normal camera is going to blind the camera.
Yes, absolutely.
So, I mean, if these things are literally, and I'm talking monsters, big, UFOs, all this stuff, if it's coming into our visible spectrum from the infrared, just the infrared alone would be enough potentially to make those pictures blurry or make the camera not be able to take the picture because it can't focus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first we have to acknowledge the limitations of our technology, as modern as it may be compared to what we had available like just 10 years ago.
Right.
Like, I dare anyone who has a cell phone to go out, right now, if you can see if there's that the moon is up at the night, and try to get a picture of that, and I bet that 90% of people will only get like an indistinct
blob,
like red dot that is like, okay, so that was the moon, and it's nothing. I was seeing Jason McClelland, who was part of the Open Minds organization a few years ago, posting an article about someone who the title of the article was "Man records films jellyfish UFO in quotes every night."
Mm-hmm.
and I tweeted something to the effect of, okay, title correction: man with a really crappy camera, films a small light every night, because that's just the thing. All right, so there's that. Now, getting back to this idea, which is interesting, the idea that these paranormal phenomena emanate or generate or somehow reflect infrared light will be consistent with what John Keel used to say, that one of the effects of having a UFO close encounters is that often witnesses will get puffy eyes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Which will be, like the result of being in the close proximity of these objects which generate a lot of radiant energy. And interestingly enough, I think I listened to this in a Mysterious Universe podcast, the idea that some researchers had come to the conclusion that one of the peculiarities of UFOs is that, yes, they generate a lot of light, but that light doesn't seem to reflect or be reflected by the environment.
True.
Like, for example, you will have a UFO that is bright in the sky, but the light of the UFO will not be reflected. For example, if there's a car nearby, they won't be reflected in the metallic surfaces of the car, which is something like needs to be explained. Now, could that be one of the reasons why people can't take pictures of them? Maybe. I mean, also, I'm thinking that maybe like in the 60s and the 70s, cameras didn't have the same kind of like autofocus technology that our cameras now have. So they will, you will just try to use to adjust the lens and focus the camera manually, right? And would that even be would the infrared also cause the photograph to not be taken? I cannot answer that, and my knowledge of photography is quite limited.
Well, I would think it would at least potentially make the picture blurry. It may appear clear to when you're looking in the viewfinder of the camera, but the camera itself may not be able to reproduce what it's seeing because it's not in a light field that it can produce.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be difficult. It depends on what kind of camera it is. If it's a camera where you're actually seeing through the lens, like a single lens reflex, so you're seeing the image through the lens rather than what's called a rangefinder, where you're looking through like a separate sort of optical piece. Like if you were seeing it on the camera, then it should show up on the whatever your video is, however you're capturing it, be it film or digitally. And if it doesn't, then something else completely is going on. But if you are seeing it through your naked eye and then taking a photograph, with something that has a rangefinder, then you wouldn't necessarily know if you're getting that. On the other hand, I mean, this makes me think, and of course, because of my particular weird upbringing and the stuff that I learned and was exposed to there, I immediately think of the idea of subtle body and subtle organs, which is something that you find in, Tibetan Buddhism and Vedic tantric philosophy, which is the idea that, there are different types of light that are seen by different types of organs, which would be in our, the subtle or diamond body, which is, connected to our astral body, many different names for it. And that within this body, in the same way that we have our sort of physical gross organs, there are, these organs, and I'm using air quotes here, that perceive things that are in this, in the other side, spirit realm, astral plane. And so it's interesting to me. I feel like there are some of these, in the litany of UFO sightings and reports. There are some, yes, where you get this physical object and you get, an apport, or there's something that's captured on film. And then there are these other reports where somebody is seeing something and it's, the other person that's next to them in the group does not see it.
Yeah. Well, also,
go ahead. The pineal gland is basically a light detecting organ.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm not mistaken, it's basically an atrophied eye. It's like that's what they say. There's a third eye. So so the idea that witness, a human witness, or at least like a live organism will be able to detect something manifesting in the sky or in the vicinity that is not detected by constructs, be that a camera or be that a radar, a computer, is something that is interesting. And obviously we enter into a philosophical question. Well, then does that make the apparition real, or should that be categorized as an hallucination? And what if it's a hallucination that is nonetheless shared by a number of people? It's just not just one person, experiencing it. Then what is it that we are so obsessed with technology and said, we need this experience to be confirmed by our machines, and then is when we can determine it was quote unquote real.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also you got to consider there's a lot of infrared photography that shows UFOs that people aren't seeing with their naked eye.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and the same with ghost photography. Occasionally you get ghosts where, no one's seeing something, or you get those pictures where someone takes like 3 shots, and in one of them there's something that's not in the other 2 shots. And I wonder if that's something just barely on the perceptive range of the camera that just for a moment was more visible than it was in those other 2 shots.
Mm-hmm. Or I don't wonder too if the person's, I still think that there could be a myriad of influences or catalysts that are happening at the same time. I still think too that the person who's wielding the camera, of course this doesn't apply if you have one of those remote cameras. I guess maybe it could apply remotely to the operator, but I feel like the person who has the camera themselves, there is something to be said about what's being manifested or co-created, to borrow from Greg Bishop there. And I think that who was that woman? There's a British woman, you probably know this, RPJ, much better than I do, who took a series of photographs and she got I can't remember if it was spirits or UFOs, so maybe none of us are going to know. But I feel like that she would consistently get these, and it didn't matter which camera she used, which film she used, but it was only her. She would get these sort of like light apparitions that would show up on the camera. You know what I'm talking about, Seriah?
I do, and to me, I feel like that is us unconsciously projecting onto the media. And I think a lot of EVPs are the same thing. Maybe not all of them, but I find that ghost hunters routinely, they might start out going, oh, we got this, we went on 10 investigations and got 2 EVPs, but once they've been doing it for a while, every investigation, yields a host of EVPs, and it's like, is that because you're creating them without realizing it? You're not getting better at communing with the spirits. You're getting better. Your unconscious is getting better at giving you what you want.
Yeah, exactly. There was this guy, this Dutch guy. I don't remember his name. I think he was Robert something. He was connected with a crop circle researcher.
Yes.
A woman. And this guy, he took these infamous UFO pictures that everybody thought, well, they are it's obvious that he's faking them. And I remember making the argument at the Paracast forum where I used to, hang out a lot, that maybe this guy was unconsciously projecting these things into the camera, almost like some kind of like savant Ted Seriah, right? And Ted Seriah obviously is also a very controversial person. Is a guy who was claiming to have the ability to create psychic photographs or thoughttographs, as he called them. And a lot of people like the late James Randi claimed he was a fraud, and he tried to find ways in which the guy could fake these photographs. But obviously, like Seriah has said plenty of times, you can only say that this is a way in which he could fake them, but that doesn't mean that that's actually the way that he did it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that woman's name is Nancy Talbot.
Talbot. Yep.
And the guy and the guy also not only could get good UFO photos, but he could tell when crop circles were going to appear.
Yes.
His name was Robert Van den Broek. She's currently still posting about his stuff because she's on my friends list.
Yeah, they're like showing photographs of alien tentacles and stuff. I mean, there's a lot of trickery and tricksterism involved in that case. It's like a can of worms.
Yeah, and that's so much of this stuff because it is hard to replicate. Mm-hmm. You may get something that's totally legitimate, but then people want to follow up. Mm-hmm. What else did you get? But yeah, one of the things in the Keith Linder case that I found very interesting, the Seattle Demon House, is when Steve Muir, is it Steve Muir? I think that's his name. The parapsychologist from the UK was there studying it. When they turned on the infrared camera, one of the EVPs they caught at the time was a voice saying, "We don't like that." Mm-hmm. And so if these things exist partially in the infrared spectrum, you got to wonder if it's like, you turn on an infrared camera and those beams come out and it's like shining a light into their eyes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and, maybe it affects them in different states differently. Again, we don't know what we're dealing with.
Yeah, that's what Mr. Apple used to say to John Keel, that ultra-terrestrials didn't like people like flashing lights at them, at their UFOs. That used to affect them because they are made of light, in a sense, at least when they are manifesting into our reality. Yeah. And obviously that's, again, a very controversial case. Maybe Keel was being fooled by someone, but nonetheless, it's an interesting idea that, maybe UFO manifestations, paranormal manifestations, can be affected by visible light, and that's why, the majority of mediums will say, well, we need to have the lights off in order for the spirits to be able to appear. And obviously, skeptic will say, well, that's that they say that because that's, they need to be in the dark so they can perform their hoaxes. That's so your mileage may vary.
There is a video. There's a video somewhere, and I've been looking for it. And if anyone knows where this is, please let me know. I believe it was on the UFO Hunters show that Bill, what's his name, did for Sci-Fi. I can't remember. I figured you'd know Red Pill. Bill something.
Bill
did the UFO magazine for a long time.
Oh yeah. This guy.
Well, anyway, on one of their episodes, I'm pretty sure it was that show. Now, the show aired almost 10 years ago, so maybe it was something else, but I'm pretty sure it was that show. They showed a police helicopter with something following the police helicopter. They were using an infrared camera, and they could see this object that, legitimately looked like a UFO. It was like a globe that was spinning, and it like had things spiraling in two directions at once. And it kept following the helicopter, and they couldn't see anything. They're looking out the back of the helicopter, and they're like, there's nothing there. What the hell is this thing? And so it was only visible in the infrared. And like, it was if I remember right, it was a very clear image, and they were just kind of freaking out a little bit because they couldn't see anything. Mm-hmm. And I cannot find the clip anywhere.
Yeah. It also, not that I'm a huge Hastings fanboy, but it makes you think, or makes me think of nuclear test sites and atomic, testing and UFOs, and the amount, like the light that is produced there. Who knows if there actually was nuclear bombs that went off of Mohenjo-Daro, or some of these things that are speculated upon, but we know at least that they were recently, for sure, and that there have been a few cases where there has been a correlation between those. But the sort of, I guess if you want to go so far as to say the disruption into that world, if there is a world, whatever you might want to call it, that has light, that is affected by light and impacted by light, then what is created in that space, in that world, when you detonate something at the atomic level?
Well, and I think
you gotta wonder.
I think it was in The Key that Strieber, like the being he's talking to, says something that like nuclear explosions actually can destroy consciousness or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. It is The Key.
Yeah, so I don't know how much faith I put into that, but that's a really scary concept. Like, if we normally have, an immortal consciousness, but something like a nuclear explosion could destroy it.
Right.
And if it could destroy that, maybe it could destroy things that exist on a different spectrum. The Key is one of those pieces of Strieber's work where I was just kind of not utterly convinced. Like, I don't want to think he's lying or making stuff up. But, like, there's so many things in that book where I'm just like, I don't know.
Yes. Strieber, like, I think, as we were speaking about before with many researchers that I like, there's some things I disagree with or don't get or rub me the wrong way, and some things that, totally resonate with me. And I think, Strieber, The Key is really, it's interesting. I feel like a lot of the stuff that's in there is in some ways derivative, or I feel like I've encountered similar stuff other places. Not that means that there's anything incorrect about that. There could be a reason. But it was interesting. It kind of came out of left field. It's a really odd piece if people aren't aware what The Key is with Strieber. It's a book that he wrote about essentially this, and for those of you that read it, correct me if I'm wrong, he had this encounter, I believe it's in Canada, in Toronto, where he is in a hotel room with his wife, and it's one of these situations where she remains asleep, but he...
I don't think he was... No, I don't think
not
he
with
was,
his wife?
But it was a book tour.
Yeah.
It was a book tour, okay.
Yeah,
so he was in a hotel
himself.
room, and he was essentially visited by this small man in a turtleneck, if I remember correctly, who told him all of these sort of secrets about life, the universe, and creation. And he identified as, again, it's been a long time since I've read it. It was, I think, when it first came out. The guy identifies as both sort of some sort of ultra terrestrial, but also a Canadian too.
Yeah, something like that.
He said, I'm a Canadian, but I don't pay taxes.
That's
Like
good.
alluding to the effect that he's part of some kind of like secret society, those fabled underground civilizations that really don't have any kind of like contact with with our society.
And it's also
it's fascinating.
It's also possible someone was just playing Strieber. I mean,
maybe. I mean, and I know that Mike Cleland, who's been on this show, has mentioned the key on a couple of occasions. Mike, who has also read a lot of channel books, he is of the opinion that the key has the flavor of a channel book. That's something that Strieber channel. Although Strieber is adamant that this interview or this conversation really took place physically. That this man was a real physical being, even though maybe he was not a normal human being, and that he took numerous copious notes after he left, and that's what became the book. So I don't know. I it's been a while since I read it. I found it fascinating, particularly the idea about the afterlife. It made so much sense to me. The idea that people or souls live in this what you may call the eternal now. Mm-hmm. And they live in this state of ecstasy, but in order to attain more ecstasy, they need to perfect themselves or gain more experiences. And that's why they choose to incarnate, trapped in the world of space and time, which obviously conveys a lot of suffering. Because obviously, if you are born, it means you will eventually have to die.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But and how that is, it's very much in alignment with what philosophies or religions like Buddhism will tell you, or other New Age philosophies. But still, and also I remember one of the most disturbing thing about that book is at one point, the master of the key tells Strieber that right now our civilization is so obsessed with material things, with materialism, the possession of things, but that events will soon cascade in that to the point that we will be completely fed up with materialism. Like we will finally be able to overcome our addiction with material things, and obviously, after we've gone through with our current situation with the pandemic, and you see that people are really struggling, trying to stay afloat and trying to survive in these troubling times, and you see the Dow Jones going to an all-time high, while thousands of people are in line at the food banks.
Yeah,
and that's one sin. Well, that's if that is not the canary on the coal mine, dying.
It's funny. Yeah, I mean that was one of the things too that the key sort of that I found interesting about it is that it was very similar to a lot of the teachings that I think I probably mentioned, the strange cult, not really a cult, more of a weird. I say weird because it is weird in the sense that it is a very unique guru that my parents followed, who were in sort of the hippie era, and the cosmology that came out of this teacher who died in 1969, and it was sort of involved, had two stages of involvement in like both hippie culture, the resurgence, and back in the like post World War I Crowley, post Crowley Western esoteric space. Weird dude named Meher Baba. And a lot of the stuff that came out of his teachings, which I only know of because I was raised by my two parents who followed it, was this weird mix of Vedic and sort of Sufi and mystic cosmology, some really obscure stuff, and then some stuff that's not so obscure. A lot of channeled stuff going on for the people that were involved in his circle. This one woman in particular, Phyllis Frederick, who was an American devotee of his that was alive. She passed, I think, I want to say maybe in the 90s, but she had all of these really intense psychic visions that really jibed with a lot of the stuff that was in the key, and some Edward Casey stuff too. Like she had these visions of Atlantis and things like that, and these past life visions and regressions and things. I think some of them are actually documented in some pamphlets that I want to say not Adamski, but somebody close to Adamski had published at one point. Anyway, the key was very similar to that. And, I don't know if Strieber ever heard of any of these writings or things, but they both, had this idea of, secret chiefs, these sort of masters, not called masters of the key, but called perfect masters, and these ideas of like spiritual agents that exist around the world that know things in this sort of enlightened way, and help guide, but can't really guide the future of humanity. So it was interesting to read that. I mean, I honestly don't know. I have no idea. I certainly am not. I'm not a part of the religion my parents were. But some of these things I find still to be very interesting. And I think that seeing some of that in the key is what kind of drew me to it, and part of why it sort of stuck out for me amongst all of Strieber's stuff. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting piece. I mean, whether or not you believe it or not, and because he's Strieber, I think it's pretty compelling too, even if it is derivative. But I think, right. I guess my point being is that I feel like some of the derivation comes from these themes that I feel like you said, RPJ, are sort of these new age themes that have been coming up for some reason, essentially since like Theosophy.
Yeah. Exactly. That's what I was going to bring that up, that the idea of ascended masters like guiding humanity has been around ever since, like you said, Madame Blavatsky started to promulgate the ideas of Theosophy, which had a huge impact later with the resurgence of the counterculture, a new age, and the idea of Mount Shasta, and all of that, and also getting back to this idea that we were talking about, how UFOs and the infrared. It's important to remember how during the early years of the contactees, a lot of these people were adamant in pointing out how UFOs and these space brothers were not really physical, that they came from other planets, but these planets were not physical in the way that we understand it, that they were like pretty much ethereal worlds, ethereal planes of existence. Yeah. And that's when we can come back and to all these jumbled up ideas of Eastern mysticism and also Western mysticism, and repackaged for the space age era.
Yeah. One of the other interesting things that came from my listening to that interview they did on Brothers of the Serpent, I think in part 3 of their conversation, they're talking about World War II. Yeah, maybe it was part 2. They're talking about like Foo Fighters and stuff like that. And he relates a story where at some point the UK had captured a German stealth fighter, like an early version of a stealth fighter. And their scientists couldn't do anything with it. They had no idea what it was or what it was supposed to do. And they turned it over to the Americans. And the Americans eventually figured out, that it was supposed to be not show up on radar, etc. And I thought to myself, okay, so here is a culture on Earth that is technologically compatible with another culture, and we can't figure out what their plane does. But we're supposed to be able to back engineer alien technology that could be thousands of years advanced from us, not from a human culture. And that to some people is not a big deal. Like, oh yeah, we could do that. It's like we couldn't even figure out what the stealth craft was for the Germans.
Right.
And that, that kind of kicks the I mean, it would be like going back to, 100 BC and handing someone a laptop. Like, they're not going to be able to recreate that. The technology, even to make the parts, wouldn't exist for thousands of years. So even if they could figure out how to turn it on and maybe even do something with it, they're not going to be able to recreate it. They're not going to be able to back engineer it.
Well, getting back again to Whitley Strieber, he was interviewed by our friend Greg Bishop in Radio Misterioso, and one of the things that Whitley told Greg is, they were discussing the metamaterials, right? They were very much in vogue a couple of years ago. All this talk about alien metamaterials and how Robert Bigelow was trying to get a hold of them, and then
right.
and then Tom DeLonge and To the Stars, and how obviously there's all these scientists trying to determine their chemical and physical properties. But Strieber mentioned something to Greg, to the idea that when you hold one of these pieces, it speaks to you. Like they affect certain people at the psychic level, and it's like you're saying, Seriah, like, okay, you're trying to figure out how the plane flies, while you're not taking into consideration its stealth anti-radar properties, and these people are trying to figure out how they can revert gravity with these materials, but they're not taking into consideration how maybe they have other properties. And I remember I used to tell my friends, what would be interesting if someone should tell Tom DeLonge that they should try to get a psychic to hold one of those pieces and see, the kind of psychics that can get readings out of someone's keys or someone's glasses.
Psychometry.
Psychometry, exactly. What happens if you get a very skilled psychometrist and you tell them to try to see what they read about these materials? And to me, that will be an interesting experiment. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's, for at least some portion of the government's, I don't know, through secret experiments that they were doing from Puharich on, or even prior to that, they must have, if they had metamaterials, they must have brought psychics in. And if they're bringing Ingo Swann in, to remote view, they're bringing psychics in to look at metamaterials. Yeah, I totally wonder what that is. That's a great idea. I mean, not that Tom DeLonge's going to do that.
Hey, what happened to all those revelations we were supposed to get back in the beginning of 2020 from these people?
I don't know. I mean, yes, we didn't invest enough money.
Yeah, that must be it.
Yeah.
I mean, the last thing I heard about Tom DeLonge was busy directing a monster movie.
Really?
in California or something to that effect. I mean, you have to remember, it's To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science.
Yes.
So there's also an entertainment component in the operation. Although many people will say that it's all entertainment.
Right. Right.
I don't know. I mean, right now the rumor mill in UFO Twitter had something to do with something that was going to happen on December the 2nd. I don't think To the Stars was particularly involved with that rumor, although obviously, once when there's a rumor cooking around on social media, you can pretty certain that they are not far behind. But there was something. Some people were saying that it was either something that maybe James Fox mentioned or alluded to in an interview. I mean, one of the possibilities was that Jacques Vallée and Gary Nolan were going to publish a paper. One of their showing their latest findings, and that seemed to be interesting. Although I don't think it will be particularly groundbreaking. Like I said, I still think that these alien alloys, as some people call them, or metamaterials, or whatever you want to term you want to use, have more to do with apports.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That you get on seances, on medium seances, than with unobtainium, something that you wouldn't find on the chemical periodic table, and maybe there are other properties in these materials that will also reinforce the idea that they are like spiritual, if you want to call them, manifestations. I once read Michael Crichton's book Timeline. Is his time travel novel, which is very good. The movie wasn't that good, but the book is really, really good. And one of the ideas that he explored in the book that is not mentioned in the movie is the idea that so basically they use some kind of like teleportation system in which they will go to a parallel dimension. A dimension that will be like either far ahead in time or behind our time, and that was kind of like their time travel. But every time they will return or go back, it was akin to like sending a fax or trying to scan a photograph, like a raw photograph, instead of sending like a file that is like 200 gigabytes in size. What you try to use is like a JPEG, right? A JPEG system that will encode all the color, using a mathematical system. Let's say, well, this line until this pixel is in red, and this other from this on is in yellow, whatever. But obviously, with JPEG, what you get is like artifacts, because you are pretty much losing information. And what happened with people who came back from these time travel expeditions, after a while, their bodies will start to get these kind of like JPEG artifacts, that will drive them crazy, or they will have health problems. Yeah. And it's something that I've often wondered, what if you could find something like that in the structure of apports, something that will show you that it's a very approximate facsimile of a real object, but it's just an approximation that at the end, it's just a JPEG. It's not really the original raw file. You know what I mean?
That's a really interesting idea.
I like that very much. Yeah, I remember that. That was left out of the movie, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a crucial part of the book. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's talk about this one interesting news article that showed up pretty much everywhere in the last week or so. which is this monolith that was found. Oh, I don't have the thing pulled up. You remember where it was?
Utah. It was in Utah, near Moab, if I'm saying that correctly.
Oh, I don't have it on there. That's why. Let me see. Yeah, and I mean, it's almost certainly a man-made structure, but it's very strange because it's in the middle of nowhere. And someone, what do you remember the story around it? Did someone just come across it accidentally and was like, "Hey"?
There was this wildlife helicopter. I think that their mission was counting horn ships. You know?
Longhorn or bighorn sheep. Yeah.
Yes, bighorn sheep, exactly. They were counting the heads from the sky, and that's why they detected this unusual object, and they say, okay, well, let's take a look. And that's what they show in the news, and everybody's saying, oh my God, what is this? Finally someone find alien evidence. I'm 99.9% it's a man-made, convinced it's a man-made object. I mean, you can see the rivets on this thing, and in another lifetime, I used to be an interior and industrial designer, and at the first time I saw those images, I said, "Oh yeah, that's stainless steel, clear as day."
Yeah,
it has a very peculiar sheen and color. And then they showed close-ups of this thing. And yeah, it's whole. You have like what I imagine is like 1/4 of an inch thick sheets of stainless steel, creating this triangular monolith. Some people have said it may be some kind of like movie prop, left after shooting some kind of like a movie or TV show. I'm not convinced. Like I said, 1/4 of an inch thick plate. It's pretty goddamn thick. You wouldn't use such a expensive and durable material. You will use something far thinner and far less durable, that to make your shooting your scene. I think that was built and left by someone who wanted it to stay there for a particularly long time. So I'm leaning more to the idea that it's some kind of like art installation. Maybe the place has some kind of like geo-astronomical properties. Maybe some artists wanted that thing to reflect light during the solstice or the equinox or something, as some kind of like sundial. That's what I'm betting.
The way it's positioned is that it's like if you're looking at it from directly above, it's triangular shaped. It forms a triangle, but it's about 10 or 12 feet tall. And the point of the triangle is facing directly at this very, very thin crack between two of the stone formations, through which you can see that water funnels like naturally. So like there is some sort of it in terms of the design of it that I can't imagine that's not intentional. So it's intentionally pointing towards this place that when it rains, like water kind of shoots out like a little waterfall. Yeah.
Interesting. It definitely, to me, I would think art exhibit. I know you mentioned it's in the Red Desert, I think I just looked at.
Yeah, it's in the southeastern part of Utah, near the Four Corners region and near Moab.
Now, didn't you say they filmed Westworld in that area too?
They did film Westworld in that area, but RPJ's point about the construction material is actually a really good point. they wouldn't have made that out of such thick material for, and they probably would have removed it. There probably would have been an agreement with the Parks Department for such a big production. And they probably would have made it out of a lightweight aluminum. And I doubt they would have made it so you could see the rivets, honestly, because that's how production design on a high budget thing is done. So I think you're right. I bet it's part of either an art installation or, maybe a ritual art installation. There are plenty of artists. I did read some sort of anecdotal article. Somebody was talking about how that area is full of a lot of like psychedelic hiker warriors who, like to go out and eat a bunch of mushrooms and become one with the desert. And, I don't know if there are any artists that are part of that. I can totally imagine that being an art project that might have valid ceremonial, personal ceremonial purposes for somebody, but who knows? Or it could just be there because it's cool.
It also seems like it would have cost a little bit of money to put it there.
That's true also.
Oh, yeah. Especially because what I've read is that that area is close to the public. Like not everyone can go there, and so it will take a lot of resources just to transport the thing or transport the materials if you're going to build it on site.
Yeah.
Obviously, someone took to build the damn thing and to put it there for a purpose, not just for the hell of it. What's the reason? I guess we'll keep on speculating. But what you said, Seriah, is that apparently that thing has been there
5
for
years,
quite a while, right?
Yeah. At least 5 years.
Okay.
I mean, it does really, in terms of sculpturally, it looks a lot like, a certain artist in particular, but the most famous, like Richard Serra. There are these modern artists that make a lot of sculptures that look like that. So it's not that in terms of it stylistically, I've seen many, many pieces that look like that.
Yeah, well, it's a very 2001-ish sort of thing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I'm betting that because of the reflective properties of the material used, in this case stainless steel, I'm sure that at some given time, when the light of the sun hits it the right way, it must be quite stunning, quite stunning sight. And like you said, man, maybe if you're under influence of mushrooms or another type of psychedelic, that it will even make it even more striking.
Right.
And it is in I guess an area that's not easily or not open to the public. But now that the location has been out, it looks like the Parks Department is just kind of like, there's only so much we can do. People are going to go look at it,
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm going to make the wild speculation right now, quote unquote, on air, that it's part of a secret cabal's Eleusinian mystery style initiation ritual.
There we go.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I hope it stays there. I hope it doesn't get vandalized. You know what I mean?
I really hope it doesn't.
Georgia Guidestones. Yeah.
How have the Georgia Guidestones been vandalized?
Yeah, painted graffiti all over them, and
yeah.
There's been a lot of acts of vandalism that have happened on them, and people have, the people who could take care of it because it's I guess it's a public landmark now. They have had to scrub the paint off.
Yeah. Okay. So this is someone had posted this story, and I asked them if we could use it because it was interesting, but it also brings up a lot of questions. Are you guys familiar with the Nightcrawler videos? You probably are. You may not know that's what they're called.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So these things they look fake, but I know a bunch of people have tried to replicate them and have been completely unable to do it. including
Right.
the fact or faked show that was on Sci-Fi for a while.
Right.
But they look like they're like these heads with really long legs that look like they're wearing loose pants. And the first video was just a weird, like a security cam footage that the guy captured.
Right. It looks like a puppet.
Yeah.
Something like that's like someone is, like you said, maybe grabbing an old pair of white pants and they put some weight in it and they are using some kind of string to try to make it look like it's walking on its own volition. But they are creepy. They are creepy videos nonetheless.
And like I said, there's people have they like the fact or faked one. I actually watched that, and they went through a lot of different ideas on how this would have been done, and they could not even come close to replicating it. Which doesn't mean it's not fake. It just means that we don't know how they're doing it. You know, that whoever did it came up with a really brilliant way to do it if it's fake. But this guy posted his experience, and he said he posted this back in May. He said this experience was the only paranormal experience I've ever had, probably the only one I'll ever have in my life, and was one of the two most spiritual, terrifying encounters I've ever had. I'm 26 years old. This experience still scares me to this day, and I will never forget walking out of that forest that night, and I will remember it for the rest of my life. I've looked all over Google, the internet, and Reddit for encounters that were like ours, and I found absolutely no encounters detailing exactly what I described, us witnessing and me feeling. I'm already well aware of the Nightcrawler videos. I wasn't aware of the videos till a couple of years after our encounter. I've seen the fresco Nightcrawler videos many times, and the movements looked way more terrifying and psychedelic in real life compared to the videos. And it looked more ghostly spirit-like. It was like visually stunning, haunting compared to the videos, and something you would have to witness experience for yourself. The one we saw stayed in the exact same spot the whole time we saw it. It did not walk anywhere like the ones in the videos, and there were some differences in appearance. The white texture and soft, silent movement of it in person looked identical to what is seen in the Ghosts of Gettysburg video and Yosemite Nightcrawler video, neither of which I'm familiar with offhand. Either of you?
I know the Fresno one he's talking about.
That's
I guess
the
I don't
main
know
one.
the other name. Yeah, I mean, I might have seen them. I know I've seen other ones. The only one that I know, the only name I remember is Fresno.
So the ghosts, let's see what the Ghosts of Gettysburg one is.
But I mean, in terms of I remember looking at these when they came out too, and they're pretty cool. I mean, there are many ways you could make something like this. So much of like practical special effects is just sort of like individual ingenuity.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
So but then there's also, a panorama of weird Fortean stuff that happens too. So
True.
Who knows?
So the Ghosts of Gettysburg video, this is what I thought it was. It is actually a smudge on the camera, but it very much looks like ghosts quickly moving between a bunch of cannons.
Okay.
But if you know what a smudge will do, it's the light reflecting off that smudge, but it looks creepy as hell. Like the first time I saw it, I was like, whoa. Yeah. And then I watched it a few more times. I'm like, nah, that's something going on with the lens.
Yeah. The Nightcrawler stuff definitely is, that definitely, because the way that the camera's positioned too, I mean, I know that there's CCTV, but the way it's positioned, like, it's not a smudge. I mean, it's something that's moving.
Oh yeah,
of its own accord
definitely.
In there.
Yeah. I mean, the Ghosts of Gettysburg one look like ghosts. They don't look like the Nightcrawler stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And with the Nightcrawler videos, I think that everybody agrees that it is not a CGI hoax.
Yeah.
Like whatever it is something that was filmed there.
Yes.
Maybe. Yeah. Whether it's a puppet or it's actually a real, entity, but it's not something that was superimposed with a computer.
So this continues. I recently sent our experience and the sketch I did of the being to someone that was a First Nations on Instagram that lives in British Columbia, not far from me, and he knew what it was right away, told me the name of the being in their language, and showed me their culture's high status symbol, which was a double-headed serpent shaped like a U with an additional double-headed serpent with horns on the back and head, and I was told to flip upside down because it represents the beings. I was told you could see them in the daytime as well as night, a little bit of other information, and told me a specific burial offering of food. I did some extensive research based off what he told me and found some of the other various names different First Nations cultures call the Nightcrawlers here in Lower Mainland BC, Canada. I posted the research I did the past year on the specific beings in PNW Canada and USA and the different names of the beings at the very bottom below our experience. Let's see. I was also told by another First Nations person that lives in the same city as me, if you do go outside at night, don't eat or drink anything. Ask before you enter the forests. It's best to keep your distance from them, and they haven't heard of too many other people encountering one. So, I mean, that kind of has a Fae sort of thing going on there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that David Weatherly has researched the Nightcrawlers and found some kind of like a vague links to Native American lore. I think I remember reading something about that in his old blog, like easily more than 10 years ago, something like that. But, I was thinking, like, if I'm like an interdimensional being or I'm some kind of like a denizen of another realm and I want to, manifest in this reality, but, recreating the whole body will be such a chore, It's like you're playing a video game and maybe you don't have enough, RAM or resolution, and you instead of playing like the latest, I don't know, Warcraft, like you only want to play Minecraft, so you only create like a very low res physical body, and like okay, just the legs. I don't need the legs. I'm not going to like recreate the whole thing. So maybe that's what we'll see. We're seeing like a lazy, a lazy ultra-terrestrial.
A lazy render. All right.
Exactly.
Okay, so here was this guy's encounter. He says, back in 2010, in Lower Mainland, Fraser Valley, British Columbia, Canada, approximately in early October or mid-October when I was 16, I am 26 years old now. My old friend lived in the northwest rural part of my city, which has a lot of forest area and farmland. His backyard has 5 acres of forest with a few houses surrounded in the distance around the outskirts of the forest. The forest has a creek flowing through it that comes from a nearby river, which is a 9-minute drive from the forest. Me and him would go to explore the forest all the time because it was quite mystical and just a cool place to wander. This one time we went out to the forest with his black Labrador retriever like we would usually do in the daytime, but this time at night in his backyard forest at about 1 a.m. to go explore and smoke a joint like usual. We were sober at the time and didn't even end up smoking because of encountering this being, and being terrified, we ended up smoking it inside his basement room. There's a steep tearaway out of the forest floor when you first walk into it, only about 20 to 25 feet into the forest area from the entrance of the forest. While we were standing at the top of the cliff tearaway before the pathway leading down to the rest of the forest and the creek at the bottom, which was the only safe way to walk down, especially at night, I could see a 7 to 8 foot tall, pure white, soft-looking figure about 30 to 40 feet downwards in the forest, and as I focused more on it, it was in between the trees, moving softly, swaying left to right, back and forth, slowly standing, touching the forest floor, in the exact same place the whole time we saw it, making absolutely no sound, and there was no wind. I wasn't even going to say anything about the figure to my friend because I was waiting for my friend to say something. We observed it for a couple of seconds in complete silence, and we were mesmerized by its movements. Then I asked my friend if he saw it, and he said, yeah, he could as well. We stood silent in fear as we watched it do its strange, unsettling, soft swaying movements, trying to adjust our eyes to the being to see what it was doing. As we continued watching it for a couple of minutes, I felt I was in a slight daze watching it sway and started to feel an impending sense of doom set in my chest area, like when you're going to die or you're in a life-threatening situation, and I had shivers going through my whole body. That's when my friend said specifically, "I don't like this." We agreed, and we left immediately. I wasn't so much scared at the sight of the being. I was more curious about the strange movements it was making and what it really looked like, and I was scared of the feeling of death that it made me feel. I was frozen with fear, and I literally felt like I was going to die and something bad was going to happen. We left very quickly because we didn't know what it was. It scared us, and our intuition told us it was dangerous. We didn't go back to check it out, and we knew it was time to leave. I remember my friend yelling something at it because he could tell his dog was scared. I am entirely positive the dog was whimpering, and the being was just still swaying back and forth right to left in the trees in the exact spot. Almost immediately after we got out of the forest, it felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and the feeling of dread pretty much left immediately. So it's not quite the Nightcrawler thing.
No, I'm a huge fan of anime and Hayao Miyazaki's films.
You're saying the exact same thing I was just going to say, RPJ.
Exactly like Nightwalker in Princess Mononoke.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the idea that I was forming in my head as Seriah was talking. It's totally true, though. Yeah, they really do. I mean, I pulled up the Nightwalker, the original Nightcrawler ones, the creature ones too, and they look. Yeah, it looks like the spirit. It looks like spirits, like the depiction of spirits in Miyazaki films.
So explain a little more about that for people who don't know, like me.
Yeah, well, Miyazaki is he's very famous, if not the most famous, sort of internationally anime director. He's kind of like the Walt Disney of Japan, though I think his films are far better. He's probably most famous for the films Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away. Like, I even, in fact, think Disney released them domestically here, or they were released domestically here, but he did a whole series of them. They're these very beautiful, very poetic films that a lot of them, most of them, not all of them, have some element that has to do essentially with animism. I'd say a representation of animism, though it strays into sort of like the folklore and the fairy, and Spirited Away with like a Baba Yaga figure. But yeah, it's these depictions of spirits, like animist spirits, Shinto spirits, so spirits of different plants and environments and objects and things like that. And the way that they're depicted is very similar to the way that these sort of flittering, they're eerie, but like the way in which they're depicted in the Miyazaki films is usually not so much eerie as like wondrous. They're very much like Oz factor. So, these people, the reports these people are having where they're feeling dread, obviously that is a very real emotion that they're having. So it's not affecting them in the same way. But again, I think some of the people in the Miyazaki films, even, there's this, fear of the spirit world. So it's not altogether, it wouldn't be altogether strange for somebody to have that reaction, for like a human to have a reaction, I guess, if we're talking about this in an animist sense, to spirits, even if they are not malevolent.
Right.
And in the movie, I'm not going to spoil them for people who haven't watched it. Highly recommend it. It's a great movie. There's this entity which is basically the god or spirit of the forest, which transforms each night into what they would call the Nightwalker, which seems like a giant bipedal figure that is kind of like almost like made out of gelatin, or maybe you will call ectoplasm, maybe.
Yeah.
But when it transforms back again into the god of the forest, it's basically some kind of almost like a stack with a human face, and it reminded me a lot of this very old representation of what archaeologists think is like the first representation of a shaman, like a shaman that is transforming into a stack, like therianthropic representation, possibly.
Is this like the Cernunnos impression, the one that is sort of like from India by way of Europe? Is that the one you're talking about?
I think the one I'm talking about is
you probably know the name.
I think it's a cave painting, and I think
it's a cave painting. Okay.
Yeah, like 15 or 30,000 years old.
Yeah. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yes, and I don't remember the name of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's another one that I'm thinking of, which is this sort of, it's this Celtic or supposed Celtic representation of Cernunnos, which is the stag-headed god. But the depiction, sort of, this is something recently archaeologists have been saying, is that it very much looks like sort of like early Proto-Vedic, like Mohenjo-Daro, what's the name of that? Harappan civilization depictions. So yeah, but I know the one you're talking about too. Anyway, the horned, the horned god, which is a common, if Josh were here, I'm sure he would have a million representations of that from sort of Fey mythology and Fey folklore.
Yeah, but getting back to the story shared by the listener, I think that researcher John L. Tenney mentioned, I don't know if he mentioned it or tweeted about of someone close to him having that kind of same experience, that being in the forest and maybe being in some kind of like altered state of consciousness and seeing a giant god-like figure roaming in the forest, so bigger than the trees, and this particular story that we're commenting on reminds me of what he mentioned. So maybe whoever sent this story, maybe you should get in touch with John. Maybe he has something else to contribute to this.
Yeah, they had posted it on Facebook somewhere, and I wrote them and asked them if we could read it. They didn't actually send it to me.
Okay.
And I am going to post the blog thing he posted, because it's there's a lot of stuff he did trying to figure out what he saw. But I am going to read this part, which says, "Here is my full description of the, quote, supernatural being. 7 to 8 feet tall, pure white, and when I say pure white, I mean paper bone white. Not see-through, just two pure long limbs from what we could see in the dark. It was so white, it looked like it was almost giving off light, but it wasn't, because it wasn't shining or illuminating the trees or ground, and I'm pretty sure you could see a shadow on it from moving back and forth at the same place between the trees. It looked bulky, strong at the top, and the shoulder areas where the head would be, but there was no head that I could see. It looked solid and it looked three-dimensional. I can only describe as 7 to 8 foot skinny separated curtains in the shape of an upside-down V or U with some sort of bulkiness shape to the top half. The whole thing was swaying, touching the forest floor right, left, back, forth, in a motion with no sound at all, absolutely no wind, dead silent. The two long legs, arms, almost looked as if how the front view of an ape crawling on all fours would look if the forearms were hunched in front. To my best estimate, it looked like the arms' legs were about 1 to 1.5 feet wide, and the whole thing was about 3 to 4.5 feet from the top to the bottom. I tried my best to squint my eyes and adjust them to the supernatural beings better to see what it was doing, or if I could make out better what it looked like, but it didn't help at all, and it just appeared as described. He did make some sketches, which are also in this blog post.
Oh, I would like to see them.
So I will post the link for this so people can check it out. 'Cause He then makes all the different connections and other things like Wendigos and things like that.
Right.
But it definitely was something that he spent a lot of time, noting and making references to, and trying to figure out what he encountered.
When did this happen?
So this was posted, let's see. It was posted May 29th, 2020. He said he's 26 now. It happened when he was 16, so 10 years ago, so about 2010.
2010.
I mean, that was that was when these were happening. I think it was 2000.
Yeah.
Look here, 2007. Yeah, 2011. So that's right there during that time period during the wave.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And one thing that I'm noticing here too, just because I was able to do a little looking up when I looked it up, is that I guess there are a series of statues or like wood carvings that have been found all around too, that essentially show creatures that look like this.
And that is one of the things he talks about in the blog post.
Yeah, David Weatherly posted that photograph on his blog.
So, I mean, again, I don't know what to make of the Nightcrawler videos. You don't get a lot of descriptions of things that look like they're draping cloth, but we certainly have plenty of encounters of clothed, weird entities. So, I mean, I guess it's not really that much of a stretch.
Yeah, and again, the appearance of things, I feel like, we have to, we're people who are looking at Fortean phenomena, and especially that which is similar, like, things that happen in the sky or on the ground, is that we sort of have to think about the diversity of, our phenomenal world as something I harp on all the time. And, we see different things all the time. I mean, the diversity of human beings in and of themselves and how they can look with all of their accoutrements and skin coloring and how they style their hair and stuff like that. I mean, there's certain bipedal similarities, but the amount of it could be so many number of things, or it could be, again, influenced by what we are thinking of, the zeitgeist of the time. So maybe, I don't know, it would be interesting to see if there's a correlation between the popularity of a Miyazaki film and between 2007 and 2011. I'm trying to think if there was something that came out then that would have been influencing, the collective unconscious.
Yeah. And the thing is, you can have stuff that someone might fake, but then you get real reports of it.
Yeah.
And again, that's kind of the morphic reality of this stuff, where it doesn't seem to have a set form. It's always interesting when we look, even like when you look at sci-fi and stuff. Anytime they find alien races in sci-fi, it's like they're all very they're all the same. You know what I mean? Like their culture is completely singular.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, ours isn't. Human beings are incredibly diverse. Life on Earth is incredibly diverse. But yet when we imagine other cultures, we imagine them to be like one thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So even the paranormal may have very, very wide variations. Plus, it's likely we're seeing a number of different things that when we have these encounters.
Yeah, and I was also thinking about what Carl Sagan used to say about imagining what a four-dimensional being would look like in our three-dimensional world. And obviously he utilizes the famous example of Flatland, a sphere or an apple in his case, when he shot that scene for his TV show Cosmos in the 1980s, like an apple coming to Flatland and saying hello to a square, and how the three-dimensional being will have a different cross-section in Flatland, depending on how it will come and go. So I was thinking, okay, how will that four-dimensional being look if we roughed it into our reality? Maybe at one point it would just look like a like a weird, pair of legs. Because it's not fully immersed here. And also think about all these ideas about shadow people or even UFOs. What if? And this is also something that is extracted from my obsession with Japanese anime. In this case, with the TV show Evangelion. What if UFOs are not really the objects? What if UFOs, the things that people see in the sky, is the shadow of?
Oh yes,
is the three-dimensional shadow of a four-dimensional entity.
Oh yes, absolutely. That cosmologically, that sort of model, that metaphor is one that I've heard several times, sort of coming from like Vedic and Eastern cosmologies. That idea of the shadow, like that is used many times as sort of a spiritual metaphor for the cosmology of how things work, like the hierarchy of the spirits in the physical world, is that things are a shadow of a shadow of a shadow. So like if there is an original, the original sort of beyond God state that exists, that is the everything. I'm not talking about God as a big white beard person, sort of the idea of the everything you're having is essentially, that is the original light, and that we are seeing our existence as the shadow of the shadow of a shadow. And I think that's a really wonderful way to think too about, the UFO phenomena as it being somehow like another way that I think about that, or you could say it as like an iceberg sort of metaphor, is that you're seeing the tip of something that has a greater existence in another dimension, space, time.
Yeah,
that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and doesn't that lend itself a little to holographic theory, where we're seeing the projection of our reality is literally the projection of something?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And I think Keel also used that flatland analogy and said, if you put a pencil down on the surface, a three-dimensional pencil into the two-dimensional world, the people in the two-dimensional world suddenly see this object appear that wasn't there before, and when you lift up the pencil, it just disappears into thin air, similar to the way UFOs and other monsters and stuff tend to do.
Yep.
Yeah. Exactly.
But if we go back to the beginning of the show, it would be very similar if it just moved in and out of the visible light spectrum.
And this is still a Lovecraftian idea too, is that somehow like our human brains, he was just looking at it in this sort of horrific, he was a xenophobe. And so everything that was different scared him. And you're talking about this view of the universe, which is, sort of completely, you're seeing angles that don't make sense, which I sometimes think of it, which is funny. Like, he's essentially talking about a horrific experience of witnessing, what for many other people might have been a spiritual experience or UFO experience.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely something to Lovecraft's stories. I mean, he fictionalized whatever was going on in his head and dream world, but there's something to that stuff.
Right.
Yeah. He was tapping into something, and when you realize, and then as we do now with our new scientific knowledge, that close to 90% of everything that exists in the universe is something that we cannot really see or detect with our instruments. We know we infer that it's there because it has some kind of like gravitational influence in the universe, but we really can't see it, and that's what we think about. Well, we're everybody's scratching their heads saying, "Hey, where's everybody else? Where are all the aliens?" The perfect paradox. Why haven't we received any messages? And meanwhile, the poor radio telescope in Arecibo is doomed. It's broken down beyond repair, and it's going to be closed indefinitely. And it is not finding home. And well, maybe it's not funny home because we just can't detect it,
Yeah.
yet.
Well, it also assumes that other cultures are going to advance the same way we did.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe there is some sort of intelligence. I often wonder, sort of talking about the similar thing I was talking about for Lovecraft, like, is there something that is beaming this knowledge to us in a completely different way? And, different people are picking it up, but, depending on their sort of temperament and their outlook on life, they're filtering it in a different way. So, maybe like Jane Roberts and Edgar Cayce and, H.P. Lovecraft and Aleister Crowley, and Krishnamurti were all getting the same, thing, but these are different people with different temperaments. And so they they interpreted this unspeakable information, or something that is beyond reason in different ways, be that something alien or spiritual truth or whatever, or Akashic record.
Yeah. And you have Philip K. Dick with his concept of malice, and this pinkish ray of light that will, transmit ideas into his mind. And now we're a few years ago, what everybody was talking about is Gary Nolan and his idea of the Caudet Putamen, that was kind of like, oh my God, we found the alien antenna, antenna that in which people are getting all this information, or maybe the reason why some people get abducted and some people don't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of interesting to see all these correlations with fiction, how fiction, fantasy, and reality, cross-pollinate in very interesting ways, as Jeffrey Kripal pointed out in his wonderful book, Mutants and Mystics.
Absolutely. Well, we are out of time. So where can people find you, Chris?
brightrectangle.com.
Okay, and Red Pill?
The Daily Grail, www.dailygrail.com, absurdbydesign.com. I'm also going to give a presentation this Saturday. I don't know when you're planning to.
No, people won't hear it before then.
Okay, but nonetheless, the Anomaly Archives that is directed by my good friend S. Miles Lewis are holding what they call the Streamathon 2020, that is going to be celebrated until the end of the year. So I'm sure that even though people will be able to listen to other transmissions, because they're trying to gather funds, they're trying to gather enough funds to stay operational next year. So maybe if you guys can, give a listen, and if you are able or willing, to donate something to this very, very worthy cause.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I should have remembered to plug that too, because that is an incredible thing, and Smiles is awesome. And we're going to be showing me and Bill Darman, who made the whole together, that will be streaming, and there will be a Q&A with us, and I think Go Rightly too.
And where can people go for this?
It is. Oh my gosh! Yeah, see, we're plugging it. Yeah, Anomaly Archives.
What is it?
AnomalyArchives.org.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you both. This has, as always, been a great conversation.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I want to take a moment here to give a shout out to all my patrons. All of you help make this show possible. I want to give a special shout out to those of you pledging $10 or more: Frank Earl, Nagatha Christie, Patricia W., Barbara Fisher, Will Powell, Big Boy Limina, Craig Parmenter, Walker, Joanna Rojas, Maddie, Dale Potter, David Moore, Vincent Treewell, The Great Change, Sam Sharon, Stone Wilderness, Luke Osborne, Becky Trainer, Rob Drummond, Alex Whitcomb, Edu Camahort, Tactical Therapist, Janet Bunderson, 36 Dingo, Taylor, Jennifer Campbell, American Rambler, Kevin, Matthew Sproul, Charles Davis, John Rutledge Foster, Eric Citron, Andy McNamara, Sasha Jorg, Matthias Sunby, Dominic O'Malley, Christopher Vaughn, Super Inframan, Riker and Stark, Tim, J. Otto Bullitt, Kevin Shrek, Jose A., Roger Gonzalez, Craig Cicernos, Ray Benedetto, Linz Jackson K., Ellison Cook, Alfred Tuttle, James Lattimore, Patricia Giaquinta, William Lovelace, Mark Brady, and Carla Mahoney. Thank you so much for helping make this show possible. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange.